The journey begins not with a map, but with a feeling. The strange sensation that the road beneath history is not fixed, that it bends and loops back on itself. Every step forward seems to echo with footsteps from another century. Streets blur into centuries, and the air changes temperature as if time itself is being crossed without permission. Somewhere between myth and memory, stories wait like abandoned train stations, each one marked by a clock that refused to behave. In a dusty corner of a European town, a man once appeared wearing clothes no tailor could place. His fabric was unfamiliar, his buttons wrong, his accent untraceable. He spoke of streets that had not yet been built and disasters that had not yet occurred. When officials questioned him, his confusion felt genuine, like a traveler who had stepped off at the wrong stop. By the next morning, he vanished, leaving behind only sketches of machines that would not exist for decades. Further along the road, the hum of engines grows louder, and the smell of gasoline mixes with old stone. In the early 1900s, witnesses described a woman found unconscious near a construction site, dressed in clothing from the mid-1800s. She woke up screaming for people long dead, naming villages erased from maps. Records later confirmed those villages had existed, but only a century earlier. No explanation ever bridged the gap between her memories and the calendar on the wall. The path bends east into war-torn landscapes where time itself seemed to fracture under pressure. During World War II, soldiers reported encountering a small group of men in outdated uniforms wandering a battlefield at night. They carried rusted weapons and spoke in a dialect from an earlier war. Before sunrise, artillery fire lit the field, and when troops returned, there were no bodies, only footprints leading nowhere, ending abruptly as if the ground itself had swallowed them. A train whistle cuts through the air, sharp and mournful. In the late 19th century, passengers on a railway claimed a man boarded wearing clothes decades out of fashion. He stared out the window in terror, clutching a newspaper dated 50 years in the future. When the train lurched suddenly, he vanished between cars. The newspaper remained, its headlines predicting events that would later unfold with chilling accuracy. The road shifts again, this time into a bustling city where neon lights flicker like unstable stars. In the 1950s, a man was struck by a car in the middle of a modern intersection. His clothes were pristine but old-fashioned. His coins belonged to a long-closed mint, and his identification listed an address that no longer existed. Investigators traced the name to a man who had disappeared in that same area nearly 100 years earlier, reported missing after stepping out for an evening walk. Traveling onward, the scenery dissolves into quiet countryside. A farmer once reported seeing a strange craft descend into his field, glowing softly before vanishing. Days later, he began describing cities of glass towers and roads filled with silent machines. He spoke of a future where people carried the world in their pockets. At the time, his words sounded like madness. Decades later, they sounded uncomfortably familiar. The path bends east into war-torn streets where time itself seemed to fracture under pressure. During World War II, soldiers reported encountering a small group of men in outdated uniforms wandering a battlefield at night. They carried rusted weapons and spoke in a dialect from an earlier war. Before sunrise, artillery fire lit the field, and when troops returned, there were no bodies, only footprints leading nowhere, ending abruptly as if the ground itself had swallowed them. A train whistle cuts through the air, sharp and mournful. In the late 19th century, passengers on a railway claimed a man boarded wearing clothes decades out of fashion. He stared out the window in terror, clutching a newspaper dated 50 years in the future. When the train lurched suddenly, he vanished between cars. The newspaper remained, its headlines predicting events that would later unfold with chilling accuracy. The road shifts again, this time into a bustling city where neon lights flicker like unstable stars. In the 1950s, a man was struck by a car in the middle of a modern intersection. His clothes were pristine but old-fashioned. His coins belonged to a long-closed mint, and his identification listed an address that no longer existed. Investigators traced the name to a man who had disappeared in that same area nearly 100 years earlier, reported missing after stepping out for an evening walk. Traveling onward, the scenery dissolves into quiet countryside. A farmer once reported seeing a strange craft descend into his field, glowing softly before vanishing. Days later, he began describing cities of glass towers and roads filled with silent machines. He spoke of a future where people carried the world in their pockets. At the time, his words sounded like madness. Decades later, they sounded uncomfortably familiar. The path crosses oceans now, landing in ancient streets where stone remembers more than people do. In the 16th century, chronicles describe a soldier who appeared suddenly in a city square, disoriented and panicked. He wore a uniform unknown to the era and claimed to be from a place that would not be founded for another 300 years. Guards arrested him, but before any sentence could be carried out, he disappeared from his cell, leaving chains locked and untouched. The wind changes, colder now, carrying the scent of snow and metal. In the 1970s, a group of hikers reported meeting an elderly man deep in the mountains who warned them of an avalanche scheduled for the next day. He spoke in precise terms, naming the hour and location. When rescue teams investigated after the predicted disaster occurred exactly as described, no trace of the man was found, and no footprints led into or out of the area. The road narrows, pulling into the quiet of a small-town library. A student researching local history once found a photograph from the 1940s showing a crowd at a parade. Among the faces was one unmistakably modern, wearing sunglasses and holding what appeared to be a device resembling a smartphone. The photo was authenticated as genuine, no edits, no trick. Just a face that did not belong to its time, smiling calmly as if aware of a secret no one else could see. At the far edge of the journey, where the past feels thin and the future presses close, there are stories whispered rather than written. Accounts of people who arrive knowing too much, who leave behind warnings carved into memory instead of stone. Some vanish in flashes of light, others simply fade, as if time corrects itself when the mistake is noticed. Each story feels like a mile marker on a road no one admits exists, suggesting that history is not a straight line, but a vast landscape, and somewhere on that landscape, travelers keep losing their way. The idea that time is not fixed or strictly linear challenges one of the most deeply rooted beliefs of human civilization. From childhood, people are taught to imagine time as a straight road, stretching from the past behind us to the future ahead. Clocks reinforce this belief. Calendars divide it neatly, and history books arrange it in orderly chapters. Yet the recurring patterns found in strange historical accounts, unexplained appearances, and moments of temporal confusion suggest that this road may not be straight at all. Instead, time may behave more like a vast landscape, where different eras exist simultaneously, separated not by distance, but by perception. Throughout history, there have been moments when individuals seem to step out of one era and into another, as if they had crossed an invisible border. These incidents often share the same unsettling details: confusion, disorientation, and a profound mismatch between personal memory and the surrounding world. Such people do not behave like travelers with a mission. They act like pedestrians who took a wrong turn and suddenly found themselves in a city that does not recognize them. Their reactions feel human, instinctive, and unplanned, which makes the idea of accidental time displacement far more disturbing than deliberate time travel. If time were truly linear and unbreakable, these stories would not repeat across cultures and centuries. Yet similar accounts appear in medieval records, early modern newspapers, wartime testimonies, and even contemporary urban legends. The consistency of these narratives suggests that something more than coincidence may be at work. When patterns emerge across unrelated sources, historians pay attention. The repeated suggestion is not that time was conquered, but that it malfunctioned, momentarily folding, thinning, or overlapping in ways that allowed fragments of one era to bleed into another. Science itself quietly supports the idea that time may be more flexible than everyday experience suggests. Modern physics has already shown that time behaves differently depending on speed and gravity. Satellites must correct for time dilation or navigation systems would fail. If time can slow, stretch, and distort under certain conditions, it raises an uncomfortable question. Could it also misalign? Could extreme circumstances, natural, cosmic, or even human-made, create cracks where moments slip out of sequence? Human perception further complicates the illusion of linear time. Memory does not move forward smoothly. It jumps, rewinds, and replays. A single smell can pull someone decades into the past in an instant. Anticipation can drag the future painfully close, while routine can make entire years disappear unnoticed. If the human mind already experiences time in fragments rather than a clean progression, perhaps reality itself operates the same way, and the straight line is merely a convenient story told to keep order. Historical anomalies often emerge during periods of chaos, wars, natural disasters, rapid technological change. These are moments when systems collapse and normal rules seem suspended. It is in these cracks that reports of time irregularities most often appear. Soldiers seeing figures from other wars, villagers encountering strangers who know events that have not yet occurred, or travelers finding themselves in places that should not exist anymore. Chaos may not create time distortion, but it may reveal it, stripping away the illusion of stability that normally hides deeper structures. Another unsettling aspect is how rarely these supposed time travelers benefit from their displacement. If time were a straight line that could be intentionally navigated, one might expect advantage, wealth, power, or knowledge. Instead, most accounts describe loss. People are injured, imprisoned, dismissed as mad, or simply erased from records. This suggests that whatever is happening is not a controlled movement forward or backward, but a rupture, an error rather than a breakthrough. Time, in this sense, behaves less like a highway and more like a fragile surface that can tear under pressure. The block universe offers one possible explanation. In this view, all moments, past, present, and future, exist simultaneously. The sensation of moving through time is merely consciousness traveling along one path within this structure. If this is true, then a time traveler may not be moving through time at all. Instead, they may be shifting position within a timeless structure, momentarily intersecting with a different slice of reality. These intersections would be rare, unstable, and difficult to sustain, which matches the fleeting nature of most reported cases. These intersections also challenge the idea of cause and effect. If moments coexist, then the future is not something that waits to be created, but something that already exists, just out of reach. This would explain why some individuals appear with knowledge of events that have not yet happened. They are not predicting the future, they are remembering it. The discomfort comes from realizing that free will may operate within boundaries already laid out, like choices made inside a story whose ending has already been written. Time anomalies also force a rethinking of identity. If a person appears in the wrong era, are they out of time or is time out of place? The question matters because it shifts responsibility away from the individual and onto the structure of reality itself. Instead of asking how someone traveled through time, we are forced to ask whether time failed to hold them where they belonged.
In this view, humanity is not mastering time, but surviving its instability. The persistence of these stories suggests that time's structure may be more fragile than comforting narratives allow. Civilization depends on predictability, seasons, aging, progress, decay. Admitting that time can fold or overlap threatens that foundation. This may be why such accounts are often dismissed, buried, or ridiculed. It is easier to believe in mistakes, hoaxes, or madness than to accept that the very framework organizing existence might be unreliable. Yet even dismissal does not erase the pattern. The same questions resurface again and again, whispered in different languages, written with different alphabets, separated by centuries but united by a single implication. Time may not be a one-way journey. It may be a vast, interconnected structure where moments brush against each other unexpectedly, and when they do, the result is not wonder or glory, but confusion, loss, and silence, brief reminders that the present may not be as securely anchored as it feels.
One of the most unsettling aspects of these time-related stories is that they refuse to exist only in the realm of fantasy. They persist because human witnesses, official documents, and physical evidence repeatedly pull them back into serious discussion. Legends can be dismissed, but records are harder to ignore. Across different centuries, people with no connection to one another have described remarkably similar experiences, often leaving behind tangible traces that resist simple explanations. These traces form the backbone of why such accounts continue to disturb historians, researchers, and skeptics alike. Eyewitness testimony has always played a complicated role in history. While memories can be flawed, large groups of independent witnesses describing the same anomaly carry a different weight. In many alleged time displacement cases, multiple observers reported identical details: unfamiliar clothing, outdated speech, strange behavior, and confusion about surroundings. These were not private hallucinations, but public encounters recorded in letters, newspapers, police statements, and court transcripts. The consistency across unrelated observers strengthens the credibility of the events, even when the explanation remains elusive. Official records add another layer of discomfort. Police reports describing unidentified individuals, hospital logs documenting patients with impossible memories, and military files referencing unexplained encounters suggest that authorities took these incidents seriously at the time. These documents were not written for entertainment. They were created to maintain order, investigate crimes, or record events for legal purposes. When such records describe people who do not fit into the known timeline, it challenges the assumption that history is fully understood or neatly documented. Physical evidence often deepens the mystery rather than resolving it. Coins minted decades or centuries earlier, yet found in pristine condition, clothing made with techniques unknown to the era, or tools that appear ahead of their time all complicate rational explanations. Museums and private collectors occasionally uncover artifacts that do not align with established timelines, forcing experts to either redefine their origin or label them anomalies. While many such objects are eventually explained, some remain unresolved, quietly sitting in archives with notes that read, "Origin unknown." Photographic evidence is particularly disturbing because it captures a frozen moment that should not exist. Early photographs showing individuals wearing modern accessories or displaying technology far ahead of their time challenge the belief that manipulation is always the answer. When negatives are authenticated and no evidence of alteration is found, skepticism turns uneasy. A photograph does not think, imagine, or exaggerate. It simply records what was in front of the lens. And when that image contradicts history, it raises questions that cannot be brushed aside easily. Newspapers from different eras serve as unintended time capsules of these events. Journalists, bound by deadlines and public scrutiny, often reported strange encounters with a tone of confusion rather than belief. Their articles read less like science fiction and more like unresolved police blotters. Many of these stories were never followed up, not because they were disproven, but because no conclusion could be reached. The lack of resolution itself becomes part of the evidence, suggesting that investigators reached a dead end rather than uncovering a hoax. The credibility of these accounts is also strengthened by the lack of benefit gained by those involved. Witnesses rarely gained fame or fortune. In many cases, they faced ridicule, professional damage, or legal trouble. People who claimed to encounter people from another time were often dismissed as unreliable or unstable, yet their testimonies remained consistent over decades. False stories usually evolve. These did not. They stayed fixed, repeating the same unsettling details even as the world changed around them. Cultural separation further complicates dismissal. Similar stories appear in regions that had no contact with one another at the time of reporting. A medieval European chronicle describing a disoriented stranger echoes a 20th-century Asian police report in tone and content. The shared structure of these accounts suggests a phenomenon that transcends folklore and local superstition. When different cultures describe the same impossible experience using their own symbols and language, coincidence becomes a weaker explanation. Even modern investigations struggle to fully erase these anomalies. Advances in forensic science, historical analysis, and material testing have resolved many mysteries, but not all. Some cases remain suspended between explanation and impossibility. Investigators may identify what something is made of, but not how it arrived where it did. They may verify a document's authenticity without understanding the event it describes. These unresolved cases act like loose threads in the fabric of history, refusing to be neatly tied off. Skepticism plays an important role, yet it often reveals its own limitations. Rational explanations, such as hoaxes, mental illness, or misidentification, can account for some incidents, but not all simultaneously. When dozens of cases across centuries require increasingly complex explanations to avoid questioning time itself, the skepticism begins to look strained. The simpler explanation is not always the most comfortable one, and history shows that reality often defies initial assumptions. What makes these stories truly unsettling is not that they prove time travel, but that they expose gaps in historical certainty. History is often treated as a closed book, with events arranged, explained, and finalized. These anomalies suggest that the book may have missing pages, misprinted chapters, or annotations written in invisible ink. The presence of credible witnesses and documented evidence does not offer answers, but it prevents easy dismissal. Ultimately, these records serve as reminders that human understanding is incomplete. The past is not just a collection of known facts, but a landscape shaped by interpretation, survival of records, and selective memory. When credible evidence contradicts accepted timelines, it forces a reevaluation not only of the events themselves, but of how certainty is defined. History may be more fragile than it appears, built not only on what is known, but on what has been quietly ignored, misplaced, or deemed too unsettling to fully confront. What makes these stories especially haunting is that the figures at their center rarely resemble the powerful, confident time travelers imagined in fiction. They are not explorers with machines, not heroes on missions, and not masters of history. Instead, they appear fragile, confused, and deeply human. Their behavior suggests accident rather than intention, as if they were pulled out of their proper moment without warning or consent. This pattern reshapes the entire idea of time travel, transforming it from a tale of control into one of vulnerability. In many accounts, these individuals show immediate distress upon realizing something is wrong. They ask questions that make no sense to the people around them, searching for landmarks that no longer exist or people who have been dead for decades. Their fear feels genuine and unscripted. This emotional response is important because it contrasts sharply with the calculated actions one would expect from someone deliberately traveling through time. Panic, confusion, and disbelief suggest that whatever displaced them was not something they chose or understood. Language often exposes their displacement. Some speak in outdated dialects, use words long fallen out of use, or struggle to understand modern terms. Others do the opposite, referring to concepts or technologies that have not yet been invented. In both cases, communication becomes a barrier rather than a tool. They are not guiding history or manipulating outcomes, they are trying to survive a conversation. This inability to adapt smoothly undermines the idea that time travel, if it exists, is precise or safe. Their physical appearance also reflects this lack of preparation. Clothing is often inappropriate for the era they appear in, drawing attention instead of allowing them to blend in. They carry objects that make no sense in the surrounding time period, items that either belong to the past or the future but not the present moment they occupy. Rather than using these objects to gain advantage, they seem burdened by them, unable to explain or replace what they carry. Many of these figures are quickly met with suspicion or authority. They are detained, questioned, or institutionalized. Far from being respected as visitors from another time, they are treated as threats, criminals, or patients. This response highlights how hostile reality can be to anything that does not fit established norms. If these individuals were intentional travelers, one might expect contingency plans or strategies. Instead, they seem unprotected, caught in systems that do not recognize them. What is perhaps most tragic is how little impact these supposed travelers have on history. Despite being out of place in time, they do not change major events, prevent disasters, or alter timelines in noticeable ways. Many disappear quickly, leaving no trace. Others live out short, forgotten lives in institutions or anonymity. Their presence feels like a glitch rather than a turning point, reinforcing the idea that time resists interference or corrects itself by minimizing disruption. The absence of purpose is a recurring theme. These individuals rarely claim to be on a mission. They do not announce themselves as messengers or saviors. When they speak of the future or the past, it is often in fragments, as memories rather than intentions. This suggests that if time displacement is real, it may be a side effect of forces beyond human control, rather than a technology waiting to be perfected. Their physical suffering is another overlooked element. Being severed from one's time means losing everyone and everything familiar. Family, culture, language, and identity become mismatched or obsolete. This isolation can be more devastating than physical danger. Many accounts describe deep despair, withdrawal, or mental breakdowns. These are not the symptoms of adventurers, but of people who have lost their place in reality itself. This pattern also challenges the fantasy that humans could ever dominate time. If accidental travelers exist, they serve as warnings rather than inspirations. Their experiences imply that moving through time, if possible at all, is not like traveling through space. There are no maps, no safe routes, and no guarantees of return. Time may not be something that can be navigated without severe consequences. Even when these individuals carry knowledge from another era, it rarely saves them. Knowing the future does not protect them from disbelief, fear, or confinement. Information without context or credibility becomes useless. This reinforces the idea that time travel does not grant power automatically. In fact, it may strip power away, leaving individuals more vulnerable than those anchored firmly in their own time. Perhaps the most unsettling implication is that these accidental wanderers could be ordinary people. They are not selected, trained, or exceptional. They could be anyone,
someone walking home, someone crossing a street, someone stepping into the wrong place at the wrong moment. This randomness makes the phenomenon more disturbing because it suggests that safety is an illusion and that the boundary between moments may be thinner than assumed. Their stories do not inspire hope or excitement, they provoke caution and unease. They suggest that if time travel exists, it is not a door waiting to be opened, but a fault line that occasionally breaks open without warning. And those who fall through it are not pioneers, but casualties, silent evidence that time, rather than being a tool humanity might one day wield, may be an unstable force that tolerates human presence only when it remains unchallenged.
Taken together, these stories form a single, unsettling message that echoes beneath centuries of human history. They do not prove that time travel exists in the way fiction imagines, but they strongly suggest that time itself is far less stable, predictable, and obedient than we assume. Again and again, credible witnesses, documented records, and consistent patterns point toward moments when the past, present, and future seem to brush against one another. These are not tales of triumph, invention, or control. They are warnings written in confusion, loss, and silence. What makes the narrative so powerful is its humility. Humanity is not shown as a master of time, but as a participant trapped within it. The individuals who appear out of place are not heroes rewriting history, but ordinary people caught in something far larger than themselves. Their suffering, disbelief, and disappearance strip away the fantasy and leave behind a far more unsettling possibility that time is not a straight path we walk upon, but a structure we barely understand and cannot fully trust. The evidence, witnesses, records, artifacts, and photographs does not give clear answers, yet it refuses to disappear. Each unresolved case becomes a crack in certainty, reminding us that history may not be as complete or orderly as it appears. The past may not be finished, the future may not be distant, and the present may not be as solid as it feels. These anomalies persist because they challenge comfort, not because they entertain imagination. If there is a lesson hidden within these stories, it is not about traveling through time, but about respecting it. Time may not reward curiosity with power, it may punish interference with loss. The recurring theme is not control, but consequence. And perhaps that is why these stories endure, because they whisper that reality itself is fragile and that the boundaries holding moments apart can fail without warning. In the end, the most shocking realization is not that time travelers may exist, but that time itself may be the true mystery, watching, bending, and occasionally reminding us how little we truly understand before closing the door behind it forever.